Hello, Jack, and welcome to my channel. I got a chance to meet Jack in the Facebook group Empowered X Jehovah's Witnesses, and I was supposed to interview him a while back. We just got really busy, and I really wanted just to share his story. His face and name just kept on popping up on my Facebook feed, so I reached out to him, and he was willing to interview with me. And I love the fact that he has such a rich history because not only was he an elder, but he has such a positive vibe in the social media world with the ex Jehovah's Witnesses. So with that in mind, I really just thought it would be of most importance to bring him on my channel because I have yet to hear his full story. So as always, I'm just going to give the microphone over to you. So if you can tell us, Jack, your real name, because as we know, that's Jack. Jack Gray is not your real name, and then how the Jehovah's Witnesses came into your life, and then your exit strategy out. And I'm going to interfere and I'm going to cut you off at certain places where I feel like I want to have you expand on. So I'm just going to go ahead and hand the mic over to you. Go ahead.
Sure. So, well, thank you very much, Vivian. I appreciate you having me on your channel. I love your energy. I love your smile. You're always smiling so much. I don't know, it probably hurts over here. Like have those huge muscles here on your face because of smiling so much.
Thank you.
So you're inspiring to many people. My name. So yeah, I was born in Poland. So my name is a translation of my Polish name. My name is Jacek. It just spells almost the same way. Half of the people know me as Jack. Half of the people know me as Jacek. But I was born basically in a divided household. My father was a Catholic. My mother was a Jehovah's Witness. Uh, Me and my three sisters, we chose to follow my mother when it comes to faith. And I think the fact that my father was quite opposing to the whole idea of Jehovah's Witnesses created really strong faith in us, right? So, like even the Bible says, the opposition creates faith. There's more somebody opposes something, the more the pushback. So we got very close. Me, my sisters, my mother, we got very close together. And then because my father was pushing so hard and the marriage didn't work out, my mother immigrated to Canada, and then she took the kids here one by one. Took her a while, took her like 9 years to get the kids all here, but it was definitely worth it. I was very happy to immigrate. There's a lot of advantages of living in Poland in Canada compared to Poland. But for me, was the main thing was actually freedom of religion, because when I was a kid, I had to pretend that I'm not a Jehovah's Witness in front of my father. I had to hide my clothes if I wanted to go to service. I had to lie to him if I wanted to go to the meeting. And that kind of thing just created a lot of problems in the family, as you can imagine. My parents were fighting over money and religion most of the time, and it's very stressful, very toxic. At one point, I wanted to get baptized, and I told my father that I'm not going to go to church. Surely enough, he shunned me. It was weird. Because that's something the Jehovah's Witnesses do. But him as a Catholic, he didn't. At first, he was screaming, he was upset, he was mad, but eventually he just stopped talking to me for like 6 months, right? Until I actually left and came to Canada. It was the most painful experience. I remember I preferred to be beat up, I preferred to be yelled at, I preferred that he would do anything else except shunning. It was crazy, to the point where actually I didn't understand myself, because I would start destructive behavior. You're a teenager and your father is shunning you. So I would do things on purpose. I would break things on purpose just so he could have interaction with me and punish me for something. And he just didn't, and he didn't care. And I was like, it just automatically you come up with this idea that you're worthless, that you're nobody to your own parent. And that I experienced from a Catholic to a Jehovah's Witness. So, that even fortified my faith that, Jehovah's Witness is the right religion, and Catholicism is all bad and evil. And then things reversed later on. It's kind of ironic when I think about it, but, then you experience the shunning from Jehovah's Witnesses and the same emotions come up, right? But to continue my story, so what happened was,
Yeah, I was gonna ask at what age were you baptized, and were you baptized in Poland or were you baptized in Canada?
yeah, I was baptized in Poland. I was baptized when I was 16 years old. And a year later, I came to Canada, right? So because of this opposition from my father, my faith was solid. Like I believed 100% that this is the truth, that this is the religion. My sisters, same thing. They did not had any doubts. They all became like pioneers. One served in Bethel. I became an elder. Like we were the pillars of the congregation. They're still in. They're married to elders, and just everybody looks up to them as an example. We were this family of everybody was looking up to us. So when I started doubting, I knew it's not gonna look, it's not gonna come out right because of so many. Just here in Canada, we have like over 20 people who are witnesses. I was surrounded by witnesses. My employees were witnesses. My tenants were witnesses. My family are witnesses. Friends are witnesses. So being an elder and being surrounded, starting doubting, that is, it's a traumatic experience. Definitely a very traumatic experience.
At
What led to it?
Yeah, I was going to say, at what point did you start doubting? How old were you when you got married, and how many kids do you have?
Okay, so I got married when I was 23 or 24 years old or something like this, and we got two kids, Emma and Serena. They're amazing kids. I started waking up back in 2013, 14. 2013, they came up with this overlapping generation, and for me that was like, okay, there's this shelf that everybody has in their mind. It's called "They know better than me." Whatever doubts that we have, we just put it on that shelf, right? It's like, oh well, I'm not a Bethelite. I'm not a governing body member. I don't have time to read the entire Watchtower from cover to cover. These brothers there in Bethel, I mean, they're just sitting with their Bible and they're doing all the research, and then they have the whole team to do the background checks and all the scriptures. They know better than me, right? So who am I to question it? And you always put all your doubts on that shelf. And when they put this overlapping generation, I'm like, I can't teach this. And I started talking to everybody in private conversations. I talked to 8 elders about this. Every single one admitted to me that they don't believe it either.
Wow. So
Nobody believed it.
how is that conversation? Here you are explaining this newfound like light, and they're not resonating with it, and you're also not resonating with it. So then they put it, what you said, on that figurative shelf. Like, how does that conversation
Yeah.
even happen? And are those people still witnesses at this point? Do you know?
So what happened was, I call it there's called a spark and a straw. A spark is something that causes you to question. You see something's wrong here, right? And then there's a buildup, right? And then there's the straw that breaks the camel's back. So for me, the overlapping generation was the spark. When like, okay, I started investigating and started, as simple as go on their app and type in generation and read every single scripture in the Bible that mentions the word generation, and you'll see that it just completely does not match their definition of generation. If you read the word generation as a definition, it says it's a group of people who were born around the same time, not lived, overlappingly somehow, but born around the same time, and it lasts until they have their own offspring. So it's about 30 to 40 years max. And if you match that definition with every single scripture there is in the Bible, it just fits perfectly, right? Like, how could Job see 4 generations during his lifetime? Even Jesus, prophesying the destruction of Jerusalem in the year 33 CE, and then in 70 years, in the 70 CE, that the Jerusalem was destroyed. So everything was just perfectly matching the definition of it and contradicting their explanation. So I'm like, how can I, as an elder, go on a platform and teach the congregation that this is the truth when it just contradicts what the Bible says, contradicts the definition, contradicts the logic, and nobody believes it either? I think that was the funniest part. I go to them like, brother, you got to help me understand this. And they're like, I'll wait for the new light. Like, I'm just accepting it for now. Like, I'm like, yeah, but how do you teach it? And some they told me, you know what? we don't have to agree with everything. Just keep your mouth shut, right? Like, just keep quiet, and Jehovah will straighten things out in due time. This is still the best organization out there, right? And this is how they justify it. Well, for me, it just wasn't strong enough. So I started digging. And funny enough, my sister told me that there was this governing body member who left and he wrote a book. And her ex-boyfriend read this book and left. So, that's evil. That's apostate. That's like horrible. So I'm like, okay, I don't want to touch this book, but let me go online. I check online, and everybody's angry. Everybody's like, oh, the Watchtower is a demonic and satanic organization. And it just, it split out so much hate and resentment. So I'm like, I don't want to listen to this. That's all bad. But this guy that was in the governing body, arrangement, he knew things I don't. I'm like, if anybody would tell what's behind the curtain, it's him. At the same time, I'm like, I got to justify this. So I'm like, well, I'm an elder. I have to learn the traps that Satan is using. If a trap is using that book as a trap, I got to learn what's in it to protect the congregation from it, right? And with that justification, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna download it. I don't want the physical book because that could bring demons into my house. but maybe a PDF file on the computer I can just click. I
love this logic. It's genius.
So I'm in this room. I closed the window. I locked the door to my office. I made sure my wife is not home, and I'm like shaking like this, right? And I'm like, something's seriously wrong with me. Like, I'm a grown man. I'm scared of reading a book. Like, what's going on? I had no idea about the how deep the brainwashing goes, but at that moment, I knew there's something psychologically wrong with this idea of being so scared of reading a book. And then I heard a radio upstairs. So I'm like, no, I got to go upstairs and turn off the radio, because if my wife walks in, I need to hear she's walking in, right? I'm covered with sweat, heart is pounding. I'm like, I got to go shut off this radio. And guess what? REM was playing Losing My Religion.
Oh my God, this is awesome. If that wasn't a sign from God, like, I don't know.
That's it. I don't know. Is it Satan telling me what's happening, or is it Jehovah warning me that's what's gonna happen, right? I'm like, I don't know, but I'm like, I still have to protect the congregation here. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna click, and if it's any evil or whatever, I'm just gonna stop reading and erase it quickly. It's crazy that the level of fear that Jehovah's Witnesses are programmed to have when it comes to literally finding out information that it contradicts their beliefs. It's insane. It's insane. But I clicked, and since I started reading it, I could not put it down. And I wasn't just reading, I was studying. Jehovah's Witnesses study the Watchtower, and they check references and scriptures. That's how I was studying his book.
This was the Conscience of
Christ of Conscience, yeah,
Christ
by Raymond France, yes.
Yes.
Should have mentioned. And I couldn't put it down. I was reading it day and night. I was reading underneath the covers, so my wife wouldn't see on my phone. I wouldn't go to work. I would just get in the car, drive 2 blocks away, sit in the car and read that book. I was reading during the meetings. I was reading it. I was reading during the elders meeting. I was addicted.
What a great story.
This was crazy. I would just, sit during the meeting, zoom in and read from your iPad, right? I couldn't put it down. I'm like, you know what? At the beginning, you're thinking, well, maybe Jehovah's Witnesses have they're not perfect. 5% is wrong, right? And then it goes into maybe 10%, maybe 15%, maybe 20. Halfway through the book, you're like 50-50. It's only going one direction. So you're like, oh, man, if I keep reading, I know what's going to happen, right? Like, what do? You put it down and you stop. I couldn't stop. I read his book, studied his book. At the end of the book, I was certain that this is not the true religion. But then I continue. I read his second book, In Search of Christian Freedom. Then I read Gentile Times Reconsidered. And my faith basically collapsed at that point, at least in the Jehovah's Witnesses. And then I'm like, okay, I got to find out for myself, because as a Jehovah's Witness, I never read the Bible. So I'm like, I got to read the Bible. I got to read for what it is and how it is, so I can make my own mind. So I literally said to myself, I got to wipe out everything from my mind, what I know, all the biases, all the opinions, all the indoctrinations, start fresh. and I grabbed the Bible and I read it from beginning till end. New Testament, I read it several times, and I study it, like literally studying, underlining and everything. Crazy, months into research. And well, the first conclusion was Jehovah's Witnesses manipulated their beliefs to the point where it's almost contradictory to what the Bible teaches.
So I'm sorry, let me cut you off. You were reading Jehovah's Witness Bible that we got from the society, and you wiped clean.
At first, no. Okay. It's good. It's a very good question. Excellent question. First, I started reading their Bible, and I realized there was a lot of words and phrases that I doubted that that's how they are in the original. So I actually, my mother, who is a Jehovah's Witness, gave me this Polish Bible. I'll show you actually. Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
This is the Bible she gave me.
Whoa. So 4 bound volumes.
Yes. And what I loved about it, so look, I don't know if you can see it, right? He has, I was reading it, underlining, right?
Wow.
And what he has, it's kind of blurry right now.
Yeah,
but what he has 2 things. He has the original text, and underneath he has references and some explanations, right?
Okay.
And what I loved about it, it's a Catholic Bible. What I loved about it was very well written, all their explanation to the scriptures. And many of the scriptures, they didn't understand themselves, so they put it there. We don't know what it means. We have theory. Theory number 1, this is what it means based on the customs back then, or there are theories that it could mean something else, right? And I love that because it keeps your mind open. It's like, no, this is what you have to believe, and that's it, right? You just open up my mind on a lot of things. Absolutely brilliant. But after all this, I'm like, there is no way that I can be a Jehovah's Witness and preach and teach this. But how do I explain this to my family? How do I explain this to my wife? I got 2 kids, right? Like I couldn't see my future in this organization. So my family right away noticed that something's wrong with me, because I'm very authentic. You know, the way I am with you right now, that's how I normally is. But when I read all this, I was like, I just shut down. I couldn't interact with people. My mind just collapsed. I was very depressed. I had anxiety, panic attacks, nightmares, what they call a religious trauma syndrome. It's the same like trauma, when your brain doesn't know what is right, what is good, what is bad, who's your enemy. You know, everything is linked to you're safe in the organization. Outside, everything is evil, demonic, and it's gonna get you, and you're gonna die. Then whatever you try outside, it's scary, and your mind plays tricks on you. I remember it was horrible. Like, people would come up to me with my business, and they're asking me simple questions, and I couldn't answer. Like, my brain just couldn't make connections. Simple things, because your brain just literally has to start from scratch. It's like, especially if you were raised in it, every decision you've ever made in your life was based on what Jehovah's Witnesses teach.
So give me a little timeline from when you started reading the Crisis of Conscience to when you started reading those bound volumes. Like, how long was that time span, and like, was it 6 months, and what was the movement from that to the Jehovah's Witnesses Bible? Like, how did the deprogramming begin, and then now you're completely lost? What was that like for you? If you can just kind of give us
2013, they came out with this overlapping generation when I couldn't agree with it, but I didn't do the research right away. 2014, that's when they had this 100-year kingdom, Jesus's kingdom, and 1914 was like, you know, that's the truth, and we are the only ones that know the truth. And then that's when I started the research. It took me just a short period of time to realize that the organization is wrong, but to exit, it took a long time. It took years. And
in
the reason why, yeah, years. The reason
years,
why it took
okay.
many years is because my wife didn't wake up. So I started talking to her, and she put up what we call a backfire effect. Instead of understanding and listening, she just put up a fight. She's like, well, I'm not listening to this. I'm not reading any of this. This is all bad, apostate. And if you keep going that direction, you're going to be on your own. You know what's going to happen. If the kids get married and leave the house, you'll never see them again.
I
And
have two questions for you. At this point,
sure.
2012 to 2014, were you still an elder?
Yes, I was an elder.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, being an elder really helped me to wake up. And the reason why it helped me to wake up, because I learned how the decisions are made by elders, which was huge in my waking up process. I'll give you an example. Let's say we want to choose a ministerial servant, okay? Everybody would get the statistic on all the men's hours and work in the congregation, and would say, well, let's see, brother so-and-so wants to be a ministerial servant. Let's take a look. So we look at his hours. Obviously, they have to be above the congregation average by 1 or 2 hours, right? Is he coming to the meetings all the time? Is he regular in service? Is he married? How is his wife? Is she exemplary? Is he taking care of microphones? Is he taking care of sound system? Is he taking care of literature? Is he involved with the build of the kingdom halls? Any of those things. And everybody's like, yep, great example, blah, blah, blah. Let's vote. And then we vote. Everybody agrees? Everybody agrees. And then the coordinator said, then let's open the Bible. And I'm like, whoa, wait. The decision was made. Everybody voted. All the qualifications had nothing to do with the Bible. Zero. And then after, they're like, let's open the Bible and let's see if there's any scripture in the Bible that would literally stop us from making the announcement. And I'm like, wait a minute. It's reverse. Then we make a decision, and then we go to the congregation and we say, brother and sister, open the Bible. And based on these scriptures, we make, this decision of the person who got appointed. And then I realized how the decisions are made, because that's the decision on the congregation level. But in the governing body, they're doing exactly the same thing. So they come up with an idea, they discuss it among themselves, and it's like, yep. All the checkbox that has nothing to do with scriptures. And they'll make a decision, they'll vote on it. If it's unanimous, then like, let's find the scriptures that will back up our decision. So then we go to the congregation, we read, based on this scripture, we made this decision. It's reverse. It's like comparing to, if I would ask you to take a bow and arrow and shoot through the bushes, blindfolded, and you would hit this barn wall. And I will take a whole bunch of people with me, and I would say, did you see her shooting? And her arrow was signed with her name on it. And then we'd go see that barn wall, and it's directly in the bullseye. Like it's just middle of a target. Perfect. And then I would ask you, questions like, is this your bow? Is this your arrow? And like, yeah, my signature. Was there anybody else shooting? Nobody else was shooting. Is it possible that somebody moved that arrow after you made the shot? No possibility, right? Those things are all true. The one thing that they don't tell you is that after you made the shot, somebody went and painted the target around your arrow. And this is the key to understanding how they make decisions. They don't lie. They just don't tell you the key piece of information that you need to know in order to see things clearly, right? And once I saw this, I'm like, man, this is why they hate being questioned. Because you bring a Bible and you say, what about this scripture that contradicts what you're saying? Oh, you're taking this out of context. Oh, you're rebellious, or this. They're attacking the person who is using the Bible to question them. Well, this is why it doesn't work. It's like indoctrination is different than education. Education, they'll ask you questions that you can come up to the right answer. In indoctrination, they will tell you what to believe, and if you try to contradict it, they will attack you, right? Or walk away from you if you don't want to deal with it. Just, oh, there's no hope here, so they walk away. So being an elder actually helped because I saw what's happening behind the closed doors, which most people will never see. And this is why even very intelligent people are sitting in the audience and they have no idea. They have no idea how
You just
they were
blew my
fooled,
mind
basically.
in so many ways right now, Jack. So, wow, thank you so much for sharing. I had no idea any of this information was, you just made it really crystal clear, especially with your analogy. So, I really, really appreciate that going into details. And I'm sure anyone who's watching this would also appreciate that. That being said, my second question was, at what point did you talk about all of this to your wife, and how did you word it so she wouldn't be completely appalled and just go ahead and tell the rest of the elders on you, or have
Right.
her be like completely shocked? Like, what was your first step to kind of getting her into your world?
Yeah, this is something that it really is important to discuss because so many marriages are breaking because of this. It hurts my heart to watch. Probably, if I didn't do the right thing, it would have broken my marriage. I think it was so much tension and so much toxicity at home at that during that time, um, that was, I'm glad it didn't happen, but I questioned whether it's going to last or not. And I basically started talking to my wife about the overlapping generation, and it just totally didn't care. She totally didn't care. And it's very important to understand why this is happening, because at the beginning we think, oh, this person will understand because I understand it. They will wake up because I woke up, right? And if I just have enough scriptures, enough watchtower articles, and enough logic, I'll put it all together, I'll present it to them. It is undeniable truth. They will wake up. And then we're like, it's not happening. And the opposite happens very often. So that was in case of my wife. She was not as active in the congregation as I was. And when I started questioning, all of a sudden, we need to study more. We have to prepare for all the meetings. We got to prepare the answers for the kids, and we got to do more Bible study and this and that. And she just didn't want to hear nothing, outside. And I'm like, man, this is going the opposite direction. So I started connecting with some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. I would go to service on Saturday morning, and right after service, I would go to ex-JW meetups. And I'm like, guys, how do you wake up your spouse? Unfortunately, most people would say, you know what, sorry, Jack, I lost my wife, I lost my husband, I lost my marriage. Time after time, I couldn't find one good example. So I'm like, man, this is bad. So I started asking different questions. I realized if you ask different questions, you're going to get different answer. I asked people, if you did go back in time with the knowledge and skills you have right now, how would you do it differently? What would you do differently to save your marriage? Every single person told me this one thing in common. It said, I would not push. I got emotional. I pushed. They pushed back. We couldn't find a common ground, and the marriage was over. So I'm like, okay, if I'm not pushing, then, well, how am I going to wake her up? At that point, I studied human influence. I did coaching courses. I went to many seminars. So I was skillful enough to know that, pushing doesn't work. It just creates an enemy. You draw a line in the sand, you're going to have an opposition. So I knew that in order to influence somebody, the number one thing that you got to have is you have to prove to them that you have their best interests at heart. If you don't do that, there is no logic, there is no scriptures, there is nothing that you can do to influence that person. And forget controlling. The people try to control them. If you try to control, it just goes the opposite direction. But if the only tool we have as one human to another is influence. And the only way to influence is to convince them that they believe in their gut, in their heart, that what you're doing will help them. And it's very difficult with Jehovah's Witnesses because their belief is, I'm safe as a witness. And if I leave, I will be harmed. Now you're trying to reverse it. You're trying to tell them, if you stay in there, you will be harmed. And if you go out there, you are safe. Right? It's literally the opposite. So you can't, I realized that you can't do it with words. Words are very weak. You have to do it with your tone of voice and with your facial expressions. Okay? So those are the things that we're subconsciously pick up on to see if somebody's genuine or not. So I would watch a TV, and on TV there was, you know, a YouTube channel or about Jehovah's Witnesses or about other religions. I study other religions too. And my wife, I remember, she would walk in and she would just so mad, right? Like, you're gonna sit there and watch, this apostate stuff, that you're gonna spread this to our kids, and you're just really angry, right? And I paused the video, I stopped, I looked her directly in her eyes, and I said, I know you don't understand this right now, but I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this to help you and the kids. And if I'm wrong, it's okay. I'll stay as a Jehovah's Witness. But if we're wrong about being Jehovah's Witnesses, then this could really destroy the rest of our life and our kids. Right? And I love you no matter what. If you decide tomorrow you're going to be a Muslim or Hindu or something, I'll still love you the way you are. Right? And that literally, her anger does go, because she's like, well, me as a Christian, right? I'm supposed to be the good one here, and he's the evil one. Started melting things away, and her guard started going down. The second thing I did was, I knew that I can move only 1 millimeter at a time. So she said, oh, now we got to prepare for the meetings. We got to study the Watchtower. I'm like, no problem. No problem. Let's get the Watchtower. Let's study. At that point, I already read the Bible.
Were you
when
still
we
an
were
elder? I'm sorry, were you still an elder at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I'll get to the point when I resigned. And we're studying. So she's like, okay, here's the scripture quoted. So I would say, well, I already remembered what was the context of that scripture. So I said, let's look at the context. And then we would read the context and said, judge for yourself if you would come up with the same understanding as they do in this paragraph. And I wouldn't tell her what to believe. And she would read it, and she's like, cognitive dissonance started. And like, this doesn't match. This doesn't make sense. Like, it looks like it's just plaster on it. Just pick a scripture that has the word in it that we're looking for, and it's there. It just completely didn't make sense. A lot of scriptures are taken out of context. So that was the beginning when she started, thinking. And what was a turning point was a blood issue. So I told her this, hon, I know you don't want to do this research. I'm not asking you to, but we have kids. And if something were to happen to our kids, I need you to educate yourself about blood transfusion, blood fractions, different procedures, medical procedures. Because I already told her that I changed my mind on blood issue. Because I changed my mind. I'm not asking you to change yours, but we need to make a decision regarding our kids. And if something were to happen to our kids, I don't want to have this conversation with you in a hospital. We need to make our minds and our decisions right now. Okay. And at the same time, I want to properly represent you as your husband. If you are not able to speak for yourself, the first person that they're going to ask, what are your wishes, is me. I want to make sure I represent your wishes properly, not because what I believe should be imposed on you. I want to know what your thoughts are, and you have to study the subject in order to tell me how you want me to represent you. Now, that clearly showed to her that I'm not trying to manipulate her. I'm on her side, and I care about her and the kids, right? So I said, listen, there is one chapter from that book, In Search of Christian Freedom. I printed out just one chapter. And he said, I cannot explain this issue as good as this guy did in this chapter. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to say, oh, yeah, I'll believe this now. But at least read it, because what's in it helped me to see things I was not informed about before. And once you see it, then you can make your informed decision. But unless you educate yourself on it, you will simply not know. It still took her like 3 months to touch it because she was so scared, but she agreed to read it. And after that, she's like, You know, you could see it. Like, I was expecting this angry apostate, right? And somebody who was like evil, and he just very logically explains everything scripturally, logically, medically. You know, she had no idea. So that allowed her to do more research. And when she started doing more and more research, there was one more step, because she realized that the whole organization was wrong after she did her research, and she still wanted to remain as one. And I'm like, I don't have any more hair to rip out of my head. Like, why? And she says, well, you think every Catholic that goes to the church believes what the priest is saying? You know, you don't have to believe all the doctrines. You just believe whatever you want to believe. But at least, you know, this is where we are. We have a community. We have brothers and sisters, a family, friends. Just show up on Sunday. You don't even have to answer. Nobody's going to force you. Just they see that you are there, and that's it. And we keep our family, we keep our friends. There's no need to create such havoc. So I'm like, oh, fine. So we remain as witnesses, physically and mentally out, for like 4 years, 4 or 5 years, right? A long time. And like literally step by step. One thing I learned was that in order to get somebody out, you have to first learn why they're in it. Everybody's looking for the silver bullet. It's number one thing, why they're in it. And it's a different reason for you as it is for me. For me, I believe that the doctrines are true. The moment I realize the doctrines are not true, I'm out. Right? Because truth and authenticity is one of my top values. But for her, it wasn't. For her, community, love, connection was a top value. She couldn't care less about the doctrines. So for her, I knew that in order for her to leave, she had to have a better community than the one she currently has. And if she has a better community, then she would leave. Because what we do is constantly trying to figure out what things mean to us. Does it mean pain or does it mean pleasure? If it means pain, we'll try to avoid it. If it means pleasure, we'll try to gain it. And for her, being a Jehovah's Witness, having all the social structure meant pleasure. Leaving meant pain. And the only way to reverse it was creating a structure, a social structure outside, which she would feel more comfortable, more accepted, more loved, right, than she did in a Jehovah's Witness world. And that's exactly what happened. We created a fantastic support group here in Toronto. We have awesome friends, much, much better, authentic, much more loving and caring that we ever did among Jehovah's Witnesses, including my family. So I'm very happy about it. But going back to your question about the elder. So when my family noticed that I'm not myself, my sister just put me against the wall and says, I've known you long enough. I know something's going on. And I first try to blame it on, problem in marriage, problem with work, stress at the business. She's like, I know it's not that. You got to tell me what's going on. What's truly going on? And the stories, they started coming up with it. Maybe I cheated on my wife. Maybe this. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. And I told her, like, I'm losing my faith. And that was enough for her to just go crazy. So she called all the family members and she's like, this is, bad. We got to save this guy or get him out of the family. And we went camping. Me and my family were like this. We traveled everywhere together. We did everything together. So within a couple of weeks, we went camping and we're sitting by the fire and we started talking.
So all your siblings are witnesses, and it's your siblings.
They're all witnesses. Yes, they're all married to elders, right? Like I was still an elder. We're very strong in it.
Okay.
So we're sitting by the fire. We're talking about, some of my doubts. All what I was mentioning is the overlapping generation and the scriptures, and we just talk about it. By the time we finished, I knew that this was pretty much over. So by the time I got home, I got an email stating, you report yourself to the elders or we will within 1 week, right? We're leaving in 1 week. Which, to be honest, they did me a favor because they just pushed me over the edge. I'm like, I was suffering, trying to pick and choose the talks I can give and feeling like, everybody's watching me. They pushed me over the edge and then it did good. So I just wrote the letter saying that I no longer wish to be an elder. I want to resign from personal reasons, and that's it. And the elders had a little chat with me. I didn't want to divulge much information. I knew what to say, what not to say, for them not to go deeper into the conversation. Truthfully enough, they admitted they had their own doubts. They didn't believe everything that the Watchtower was saying. Probably that's why they didn't disfellowship me. That's how, and then I started fading, and I faded away, right? I was not interested in getting people out, never. Just my wife, to be honest, because I realized, everybody else has their own free will, their own free choice. People did come to me, of course. They're like, you were an elder, what the hell? What's going on? I'm reading this overlapping generation, doesn't make sense to me. You can explain it to me. I'm like, what do you want to know? You want to know the truth, or you want to know what the organization's teaching? Like, I want to know the truth. And I'm like, if I tell you the truth, there is no turning back. And the guy's like, I want to know the truth. One conversation, he left, he woke up. So it's with some people, it's easy if they value truth as one of their top values. Jehovah's Witnesses don't value truth as their top value. They value obedience. That's one of their top values, because they linked obedience with salvation, not truth. If they linked truth with salvation, they would wake up like this very quickly. But because they linked obedience with salvation, they are afraid of questioning anything, because that basically meant death for them. This is why there's so much fear. And they're saying, oh, we're in the truth. Yeah, okay. But it's their own truth. They come up with different understandings constantly of what the truth is. It's kind of weird. So then I started studying, human. Sorry, you had a question.
No, yeah, I am curious to know. You at the same time as you're fading, your wife is fading, and how old are your kids at this point? And what was it like for them? I can imagine they had friends inside of the Kingdom Hall
Right.
organization. What was the transition like for them? And did they ever say they wanted to go back to the meetings just for friends? Like, did you create that community for your kids just as much as you created it for your wife?
Yes, so very good question. I knew that it's gonna be tough, even for the kids. We had 27 kids in our congregation under the age of 18. There were picnics, sleepovers, and parties every second weekend.
Wow. And how old were your kids? 2012, 2014?
8 and 10. 8 and 10 when I started question.
This is
That
like
was bond
crucial.
with the kids.
Yeah.
My sister has twins the same age like my kids, one of my kids. So they have cousins the same age. Like, I'm telling you, we were doing everything together. We were very close. Parties we organized, but we were very social. We organized parties all the time. With this, the social structure was very strong. So this is why I think I had a nervous breakdown. I was never diagnosed, but I had every single symptom when I realized that the whole thing is wrong, and I can't stay in it. And I knew everybody will shun me. There's no doubt about it. So waking up my wife took a while, but she left when we created the social structure. Kids, obviously, at the beginning, it was kind of weird for them. They couldn't understand, like, why can't I play with my cousins, right? Especially because we were not disfellowship. So it was difficult for them to understand. But then the cousins, literally at 8 years of age, they were trained by their parents now to put pressure on us. And so you can just imagine 8-year-old coming to another 8-year-old saying, Serena, I am really concerned about your spirituality. I mean, which 8-year-old talks like this? When I heard this, I'm like, they were trained literally probably during their family worship what to say to us, what not to say, and how to maneuver things. And the kids came from the neighborhood when we were there, and they're like, they're worldly kids, don't play with them. 8-year-old kids.
Your poor kids at this situation. So who were they playing with? Were you allowing them to start associating with the kids at school at this point?
Oh yeah, like I grew up basically in a small village in Poland, so there was 15 to 20 people in my congregation. Of course, we had friends outside the congregation. The average age in my congregation was 65. So I grew up with my cousins who were Catholics. I grew up with my school friends and kids in the neighborhood. They were all Catholics. For me, that was normal. I never understood this whole idea of you can't play with kids who are not witnesses. That was never my belief. So I never prohibited my kids from playing with other kids. My idea was, I don't like being discriminated for what I believe. I don't want to discriminate others for what they believe. That was my philosophy, and never stopped my kids from doing it. And it was such a blessing that we woke up at the right time. I knew that this was a moment. I couldn't wait any longer, because if the kids at one point, which is about 13 to 15, right? And now they're pushing earlier when they're deciding to be baptized. It is so much harder after. So I knew, I'm like, this is a perfect moment. And interestingly enough, when the older one went to high school, Emma, she went to art school, and they were talking about the transgender kids. And we noticed certain pattern in her, and we asked her, well, what name did you give them? And said, Elliot. I'm like, oh, let's have a seat. Let's have a chat. So she decided that she doesn't want to be a woman anymore. She wants to be a boy, right? And if you were a Jehovah's Witness and your kid comes up with that kind of news to you, it is unacceptable, right? Like they can't accept it. They can't possibly say, oh, that's no problem. So I was so happy that we woke up when we woke up, and we left when we left, because when we dove into the subject of transgender kids, so many of them are depressed, suicidal, they can't function properly in a society. Number one reason is the parents are religious and they never accepted them. So I was super happy. And then the second kid also came out as they. I don't fully comprehend the whole thing, to be honest with you. Fluid gender or something like this that she claims to be. She wants to be called Skylar. I love them both no matter what. I will never treat them any differently. That's the beauty about it. If we were still witnesses, this would be a disaster for them, for us, for everybody. So I'm super happy that we woke up when we woke up, and we can live authentic life and have a happy family. And today they're thriving because they're finding kids and friends who are very authentic, right? They can be themselves. They're not worried about what is this person going to think of me. Some people say, well, the whole disfellowshipping it's like a curse that will keep keep them in a really bad spot for the rest of their life. It can be a wonderful blessing because there's a literally line in the sand when you realize these people no longer care about me. It's painful. It's painful to admit this, but you are allowed to move forward on your own terms. And if anybody asks you, well, what's better out there? What's better, outside the organization? The organization is the best, organization, the best love, the best community, the best hope, the best Bible, and just the best. What's better? What's much better? It's alive on your terms. It's the best answer I can give anyone who asks that question. What's better out there? It's a life on your terms. It's not a life that they tell you how you have to live in order to be accepted, loved, saved. It's a life on your terms. And once you have a taste of it, and the only way to have it is when you get rid of that fear of what they will think. Not one Jehovah Witness ever makes a decision based on what the apostate will think about me. Not one decision ever made by governing body members was ever made based on fear of what the outside world will think of them. And yet, Jehovah's Witnesses, they fade away and so scared of what the Jehovah's Witnesses will think of them that sometimes decades later, they're still enslaved to that thought. And disfellowshipping allows people to say, you know what? They don't care anymore. I'm out. I don't have to worry what these people will think of me. It gives you this closure and say, you know what? I can live my life. And guess what? If you don't like it, if you really feel horrible, go back. You already know how. If you think your life was better as a Jehovah's Witness, there's a perfect path for you to go back. Right? And if you don't want to go back, then close that book and write a new one. The best of your life can be the best. The rest of your life can be the best of your life if you make it so. Right? So that's why we started, with this Empowered Mind Facebook group and helping people, because we realized there's a lot of people who are suffering. We know how to end that suffering. Just shift people focus on all the things, all the wonderful things that they have already and that they can gain in the future. Because when you witness, you just constantly focus on problems. And there's only one solution to all the problems. Jehovah's kingdom will come and resolve all the problems. But everything else is like problems. This trauma bonding, what they have. If you have a problem and I have the same problem, and we talk about the problems in the world and watch the news and war over here and the famine here and the pandemic here, it's a sign the end of the world is coming. And they literally are incapable of seeing the good in this world. They're incapable because they're constantly focusing on what's evil. When you flip this and you show people, hey, first of all, the world is not all evil, and there's an enormous amount of good people in it. And we're living a life that kings and pharaohs couldn't possibly even dream of. They couldn't. You want to have look how we're communicating right now. What would the King Solomon, with all his glory, what kind of gift he would give you to have internet, to have a cell phone, to have air conditioning, to have a car? What would he give you to have the luxuries that you take for granted, to have a clean water? We take it for granted because we all have it. It becomes a life's expectation as normal. But majority of the people don't have that. Some people risk their life just to live in a developed country. We see it all the time. And we have to remind people of how lucky they are to live during the time that we're living today. When would you like to live? If you had a button that would allow you to go back in time, when would you like to live? During the medieval times? During World War II, World War I? Hundreds of years before? Thousands of years before? You name it. I guarantee you would not want to live there. Even 20 years in the back, right? Like if you were a king, the most wealthy king out there, would you go to a dentist back then? How many women were dying, just delivering kids? So we're living in extraordinary times. We need to be reminded of how wonderful the life is. And if you actually see what the technology will do for us in the next just 5 to 10 years, it's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. We already double our lifespan. We could probably do it within our lifetime again, to double our lifespan. It's crazy what the medical field can do in the near future. It's absolutely amazing, and we should be able to see it and appreciate, be grateful for it. It's hard with the mind of everything is evil. Right?
Speaking of gratitude, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing the unconditional love that you show to your 2 children, for allowing them just to love them just for being, instead of trying to fit a certain mold of a certain kind, of a certain way of being, to fit that lifestyle that you felt like you needed to influence them to live. I really commend you for being a new parent. It's like you were born a completely different person in just a short period of time, which is so hard to do. So I applaud you for that. That's fucking awesome. No, but seriously, that's really, really awesome. Your kids, I would be honored just to meet them. But that is just to talk about that specific topic of unconditional love. And being disfellowshipped versus being in the organization, or being, I was disfellowshipped, and I say it's the best worst thing that ever happened to me. At the time I thought it was the worst thing. Now it's
That's
like
right.
absolutely the best thing that ever happened to me. I would not
Absolutely.
be 100% not here in this life
Yeah.
if it wasn't for that. But the conditional love, when you're in the organization, you're love bomb when you first join. Everything is so wonderful. Everything is so rosy. You have everything is right in front of you. Everything looks so amazing, and
Yes.
you feel so great most of the time when you're in the Kingdom Hall. And then when you're out of the Kingdom Hall, the real world hits, and like you were saying, oh, the world is bad. Then we get caught up in the news and all this other stuff. And then the only hope is a new order. And then no one really likes you in the quote unquote world, because you haven't even given them the time of day. But then when you're
Yeah.
out in the world and you get influenced by the real you, and you find out who you really are, then you find out what unconditional love means. And you're like, holy fuck. I've been blindsided this whole time.
Yeah.
Like I never even knew what love was. This is
Yeah.
this is insane. It's like
Yeah.
being reborn into a whole new way of being,
Absolutely.
because this unconditional love is like a rebirth. And when you get that kind of love from somebody, you get to be curious about who you are, because the witnesses didn't give you that choice. Now you're curious about who you are, and then you can have compassion to all sides of you. Whereas before, if you only if you fit a certain mold will those people like you. But now you get to be whoever you want to be, in the context that you're not hurting anybody else. You're being good to yourself, and people are going to love you just for being. You don't have to be the best at anything. They just love you for being, which is such a beautiful thing. And I also love the fact that you said, out of all times in the world, like what a time to be alive. Of course, we can focus on the absolute horrible things, but we can also focus on the absolutely amazing things. And look, I've been living in Costa Rica for this whole year, and there's still like more than half of this country doesn't even have warm water, let alone a washer and dryer. Like I lived for 7 months without having a
Right.
washer and dryer. I washed all my clothes by hand. So in 2022, we're still having these countries that are living like that. So if you're living in a place with hot water, a heater, an air conditioner unit, a TV, Wi-Fi, like you are on top of the world. Know that there's
That's
so
right.
many people out there that are not experiencing those things. That we get to experience those things is amazing. So yes, we can focus on all the negative things, or we can actually focus on the really amazing, beautiful, epic things that are happening in the world. And yeah, this interview, Jack, I just want to say thank you so much. You have brought out so many good points in this interview, and there's been so many things that I've taken and I'm going to take with me for the rest of the day that have really empowered me and have shifted my mind when it comes to certain things too. So thank you so much, Jack. Is there anything you'd like to say that you feel like you left out in this interview that you want to add to it?
Well, here's a couple of things. One is we have this group Empowered Minds that I really encourage everybody to join, because in that we focus only on moving forward. We don't focus on what Jehovah's Witnesses are doing wrong. We don't focus on any of the scandals that are happening. I think there's more than enough people doing that. I'm not against these people. Don't get me wrong. They're needed, but that's not our focus. If you're looking for a direction where you can move forward in life, please join our group. Not only join our group on Facebook, but we do events. We do seminars. Right now, we're focusing on the United States, but we are planning to go worldwide. We're doing cruises as well. So we're planning another cruise already. So a whole bunch of people can join together. It is truly extraordinary to see how quickly people bond, who are happy, who want to move forward. We have similar past, we have similar trauma, so it's easily to find the common ground. But at the same time, we're not staying there. We're planning for the future, and we're looking at what's wonderful in our life. The friendships that we have there, they're for life. I know the connections are amazing. The bonds that we create are something that you can't possibly compare it to the friendships we have as Jehovah's Witnesses. Nowhere near. So much deeper, so much better, so much more loving, so much more caring. You can't even compare, because you're no longer judged. You no longer have to have a certain status in order for you to be my friend. It's like, I want to know your soul, and it's oof, you can only experience that in person. You can never experience that over the internet. So please join. I also wrote a book called Fear to Freedom. Fear to Freedom. You can go and buy it yourself. You can see it at feartofreedom.ca. That book basically is a collaboration of a whole bunch of stories of people who were Jehovah's Witnesses. I included also ex-Mormon and a Muslim, because I think what holds people back more than anything else from living the life where they can have a life of their full potential is fear. And once you realize that your mind was programmed into fearing things that are completely harmless, then it's like, oh, it was crazy for me to be afraid of those things, right? Let me try this and this. And it's just like me, like I was afraid of my own wife, afraid of reading a book. But if you study even other religions, you study Mormons are afraid of drinking coffee. They're afraid of drinking alcohol, right? The Muslims, they're afraid of taking the hijab from their heads. They're scared of things that we were not afraid of. For us, like drinking coffee, drinking beer, that's normal. Like, why would you be afraid of that? But for them, it's like life and death. It's like for Jehovah's Witness, for the first time, to eating a piece of birthday cake, they might be shaking. And you have to realize that those things were literally programmed into your mind, and overcoming those fears will help you to live a life on your terms. So I encourage people to look into it. It is extraordinary to watch people succeed. It helps you to live the life that you want.
Thank you so much. I'm going to add all those links in the description and whatever other links you want me to add. I just want to say thank you so much for this interview. It's been a pleasure, and finally getting a chance to interview you. I so appreciate your time with me. So thank you. I'm going to hit stop now.